Today we are talking about patch 5.14, the update notes for the release of Pele, the new Hawaiian assassin. The patch is called Goddess of Volcanoes, and fitting for the patch, it's incredibly hot in Germany right now, so excuse those blinds being up over there. I just gotta get some fresh air in here because the patch is gonna be hot enough, or the god rather. And that god is Pele. You can see her full card here. Most of you are probably familiar with this already. And with that, we can go right into her kit, and then we'll talk about the other god skins as well as the balance. Her passive is Everlasting Flame. Oh, by the way, I want to point out as well, her design actually looks almost like that in game too, so that's very well executed too. Her hair is maybe a little bit different, but still very nice. So the passive is a steroid that happens when you drop below 50% health. You get increased physical power, lifesteal, and ability lifesteal. The power gets increased by 5 plus 2 per level, so up to a maximum of 45 at level 20. You get 40% lifesteal, 20% ability lifesteal, and the ability has a cooldown of 20 seconds, or the passive rather. The duration of the passive is 6 seconds, so it doesn't last forever basically. But this is very strong. Not only is 40% lifesteal almost twice as much as you get from Devils, I think Devils at max stacks is 24% at the moment, or 26, and well, this is 40%. You also get the 20% ability lifesteal. Soul Eater at the moment has 15%. So really, in terms of lifesteal, this is the best you can get in regards to items, or more than items at least. I'm not quite sure on the lifesteal values of other gods in comparison because they work a little differently, but it's definitely very, very good. The duration is rather short, but also not too long of a cooldown with 20 seconds, so that can work out okay. You can obviously combine this with items that help with that, like Shifter's Shield, like, I guess, Bulwark of Hope, or with more lifesteal through Soul Eater, and that can be beneficial in that context. Her first ability is Pyroclast. Pele flourishes and fires out a magma orb ahead of her in a line. Once the fire projectile reaches maximum distance, it hovers for a brief instant, solidifies, and then returns back in pieces, dealing damage to enemies on the way back. The number of shards returning is dependent on the rank of this ability. So this has multiple things of multiple things. First of all, this ability has 2 charges. So think of this like an Agni ult, but it only has 2 charges, so you can shoot 2 projectiles. And after that, the ability will go on cooldown, not before. These charges then each deal 220 damage, straightforward, in a line, and have 60% scaling on top of that. So if you were to shoot both projectiles, this would be 120% scaling, which is quite a significant amount. But that's not all. After that, the rock pieces come back. One rock piece, one magma piece, whatever, is 30 damage, and this doesn't change with leveling it up, and it has 10% physical scaling. But if you were to have this on rank 5, then you get 5 pieces coming back after each other. So if you have an enemy perfectly locked down, or you walk around them in a way where all the rocks keep hitting, then that will be a 150 damage and 50% scaling. So adding this together, you can get 440 damage plus 100% scaling from the initial projectile. And if you shoot both projectiles and get all the return projectiles as well, which is not very realistic, that's another 300 return damage and 100% scaling on top of that. So 220% scaling, and was it 740 base damage in total? But again, only if you hit both projectiles on one target immediately and get all the return projectiles. Still very, very strong. Her second ability is Eruption. Pele fiercely erupts energy into the ground, exploding in an area around her, causing damage and knock-up to all enemies. At rank 3 and rank 5, the area expands again at a delay, dealing less damage and a smaller knock-up. So you have these 3 circles. The circles have different damage. The inner damage is 100 to 260 and 80% scaling. The outer damage is 80 to 240 and 60% scaling. And the knock-up is, well, not really indicated how it works here. It's 280, then 240, then 200. I'm not quite sure why there's now 3 damage instances. I guess outer damage just counts for both. I'm not quite sure. And the radius of the inner circle is 15 units, then 25 units, and then 35 units. So with this ability, the CC is very, very short. It's not a long knock-up at all. Don't think like Harbois level of knock-up or anything. It's very into the air and back to the ground. But the ability also has a delay. So it's not like you're often going to end up in the inner circle. The ability has 2 kinds of delay, actually. during the ability, you can still move as Pele, but you're stuck in this animation at the same time. And then the moment the ability is activated, it kind of pops out and then pops out from that place. So if Pele keeps moving, it will still be in whatever place she was when the animation was finished. And because of that, it's very predictable, I would say. You can very much see, okay, she's coming at me, she's using that ability, she's charging it up right now, so I better get moving so I'm not in the inner circle. And I'm pretty sure, I can't obviously test it myself yet, but that you should always be able to walk out of the inner circle if you pay attention and you're not CC'd otherwise. There is something with a third ability, we'll talk about that, where that could be changed a little bit, but overall, I'm expecting that most of the time you will get to the middle circle at least. And, well, Hyris said on stream that you can pretty much get out of the ability before it erupts because the rings appear after each other. I'm not quite sure if you'll always be able to get out, depending on what she does, but you should be able to get out at least a little bit. Then her third ability, which kind of goes hand in hand with it a little bit, is Magma Rush. Now, Magma Rush is more of a toggle, I guess, and I will just read it out because it's a bit strange. Pele starts to churn the land around her, dealing damage to nearby enemies and giving her constant movement speed while this ability is active. Toggle this ability again to enter an amplified state, expending more fuel but dealing more damage and providing additional movement speed. This ability has no cooldown but uses a fuel gauge and cannot be activated when below 10 fuel. So in essence, this is maybe a bit like Souls to separate, only that you're still targetable during it. You don't get any immunities or anything. You get a little bit of extra movement speed, 30%. And you have this, well, more or less trail, more an area damage around you that exists as long as the ability is active. But you can deactivate it at any point. And you can amplify it. The damage goes from 20 to 40 on the normal version and scales with 10% of your physical power every 0.5 seconds. So if you stick close to an enemy, this can add up to a decent amount. The amplified damage and everything else that comes with it is even better. The amplified damage is 40 to 80 plus 20% of your physical power every 0.5 seconds. So if you stick to an enemy for 2.5 seconds, which is not too hard with 60% extra movement speed, that is still 100% scaling. And yes, I should just end the sentence there. There's still 400 damage as well, I think. So she has quite some things going for her with this ability still, even though it's a movement ability. It can be cancelled though. You can cancel the ability by right-clicking, and you can also switch between the extra movement speed boost and the non-amplified version by just toggling the ability again. And again, you have these fuel costs, the initial fuel cost of 5, and then it just runs down. And it runs down pretty quickly with the amplified damage version or the amplified movement speed version, 60% movement speed after all. But it also recovers very quickly. When you turn it off, it comes back very quickly. I think this will need some tweaking. I think at the moment it comes back a bit too quickly and it does a little bit too much in terms of damage, especially while doing all that other stuff. We'll see about that though. So, but with what you can see with this ability is, you know, a lot faster. And the interesting thing is that you can use all other abilities while using this. And you don't even have to level it apparently because it scales in damage, but it doesn't scale in movement speed. So using this ability obviously makes it easier to confirm the return orbs, return rocks from your 1, because you can rush around the enemy when they're trying to get out of the area, unless they're too far away already. And it makes it easier to confirm the knockup of your 2, maybe even the inner circle. That's the question, if it will be enough with this movement speed. But the fact that you can use it with everything else makes it a little bit crazy, and also means you have to pay attention to a lot of things when playing Pele. Like I wish I could individually put my passive meter somewhere else just for Pele, just so I can put it next to her, because that's a lot to keep track of. And then we have the ultimate. And the ultimate brings a bit more mobility, because right now she doesn't have any kind of, you know, dash-like ability. She has that Magma Rush, which is just a movement speed boost, But the ultimate, Volcanic Lightning, is a dash. After a short warm-up, Pele dashes forward, dealing massive damage and a slow to the first enemy got hit, and dealing additional damage to enemies behind in a cone. For the next 10 seconds or 3 attacks, every time Pele hits an enemy with a basic attack, additional damage is dealt behind the enemy as well. So, you have up to 520 base damage, 200 up to 520, and 60% scaling. Not absolutely insane for an ultimate. We most certainly have abilities with more damage. But then you have the extra damage of 100 to 260 for the following attacks, plus 40% of your physical power. I'm not quite sure how this adds on top of the basic attack for the first target. It seemed like the first target just takes normal basic attack damage. I'm not entirely sure here. Again, it was a bit weird. And then the other targets behind them take the additional damage. But in a team fight where enemies are clustered up, give it like an Ares ult or a good taunt or anything like that. This will hurt. Like, this can stop a frontlining tank from really doing his job, because if he's too close to his allies, then you will just set Pele up for dealing more damage by basically smacking through you. Obviously, she can still be CC'd, so that's the other part of the story. This is interesting as well because the ability does not seem too easy to hit. It seems like a bit of a Naja ultimate, I guess, where you have to aim it properly for the effect, but I'm not quite sure which effect will actually still happen if you don't hit a target, because it seemed like you actually still get the start or something, in which case you wouldn't have to care as much about that. Either way, you can still set this up with your 2 as well. If you CC an enemy with that first, you can definitely confirm the ultimate. And that overall concludes the kit. And I think she's going to be very strong. I think especially the 1 with the 2 shots is something that still has immense scaling behind it. She has scaling across all of her abilities. Even her mobility has decent damage. She is going to like a high power build where you can kind of weave in some basic attacks still, and maybe, like I said, maybe shift the shield, maybe Soul Eater, maybe something that makes it a little bit tanky to allow her to do her job a little bit better. But overall, high power will do a lot for her already, and just the 1 alone can just shoot enemies from a distance before the fight even starts. So that's Pele. And yeah, I think she's missing some cooldown values. I think, yeah, on the 1 and 3 and ultimate as well. So that's also going to indicate a little bit about her, but I think her cooldowns weren't immensely long either way. And also she just benefits from building Transcendence, Jones, anything. So, you know, you don't really have to care much about it. You just build CDR. We can also look at her other card art, which should be this one here. The recolor with a very different color theme, more like yellow-blue-ish. I personally like the normal one better, but that's obviously up to taste. And now we move on to the rest. I'm definitely excited for Pele, but I also think she's probably going to be very strong. ZiSotto gets the Primal Storm skin. This is this one. It uses a little bit different animations apparently because he doesn't have this helmet instead of his normal hat. And he has a different sword with no like lightning going through it, but instead the lightning activates whenever he attacks. So that looks pretty cool. Then we have Molten Habois. Ragnaros straight off Molten Core. Very cool effects. Everything is lava. I like it. Probably my favorite here. And we have Mystic Guardian Athena. It goes in line with a Mystic Guardian or Mystic Defender Neath. Has, in my opinion, not the most interesting model, though the model was changed specifically for the skin. But I really, really like the visual effects of this one. She, for example, in her ultimate, when she starts going to someone, she gets wings. She has like all these different color effects on her shield, on her weapon. When she dashes, she turns into some ethereal form of herself temporarily until the dash is completed, which looks really cool too. So a lot of nice visual effects. And then we have Pele's gold skin and legendary skin, obviously, as well, and diamond skin with no card art. The legendary, in my opinion, being the coolest one of them, or the hardest. A quick look at the voice packs here. Quick listen to the voice packs. If you're wearing headphones, turn them down now. This might be loud, I'm not sure.
All you need is a little courage and a big sword.
That's ZiSotto. Now Habois.
Molten lava, hot ash, falling rock. Many of the things you do not want to be a part of when I'm angry.
And Mystic Guardian Athena.
Darkness and evil have no place in this realm. Leave now or face me and my friends.
I'm actually not quite sure which ones of these are in the upcoming event for the Tier 5 skin. I think it's Primal Storm and Molten Habois. I'm pretty sure it's Molten Habois, but I think Mystic Guardian is in another place because there should be part of the bundle, which is not a skin. Not 100% sure though. And then we have new cosmetics. Polynesian loading frame, Polynesian music theme, cutesy Pele avatar, Primal Storm fountain effects. So this is probably the bundle that I was speaking of. New announcer pack, Primal Storm announcer pack. So I'm still not quite sure. I think that the Susanoo skin might be the Vegeta voice actor one, because it gets an alter pack too. That still makes sense, but not 100% sure here. Unfortunately, they didn't say anything about that on the patch notes. New emotes, Pele, Clapley, Wave, obviously. New additions to the Awesome Chest, Electric Dream Nox, and Chompy Chibi Fenrir. Fantasy Point Store new additions, Beamy Chibi Ra, Busy Bee Cupid, and Scarlet Coven Isis. Project Olympus also has some new additions. In Joust, the second band phase is increased from 1 band to 2 bands, so the total bands are 4 instead of 3. The Jungle Practice also gets some nice additions. On one hand, there's a pad for players to add protections to Odin bot. I don't know how many, but I like it because it makes testing much easier with different protection values for a lot of people. And a pad for players to spawn minion waves in the Tower Phoenix area so you can work with backdoor protections. Arena decreased the minimum respawn time from 20 seconds to 10 seconds to make death less punishing in the early game or on losing teams. Triumphant chests have been relocated to the Play Store, whatever. And the prompt for report, I think this is important for some, decreased the likelihood of being prompted for reporting due to frequent death. Apparently there were some mechanics in that context that didn't really work out the way Iris wanted them to. They should be fixed now, hopefully. Bug fixes. Clash Phoenix's death animation fixed. Joust XP camps are now actually tigers, not cyclopses. The fountain will now only heal or damage guards, not pets or whatever. And now this one is interesting. I don't really think this is a fix, it's more of a change, but fix an issue where some percentage issues or decrease effects were not additive. For example, an item with 20% increased damage dealt and 15% damage dealt would result in 35% damage dealt. Should result, yeah. So basically this is the Artemis, the Hunbat story I was talking about with like amplifications from their passives, from abilities. And that's what we're going to see now with Sundering Spear, Runeforged Hammer, Bakasura's Takedown, Artemis still target. Not sure why Hunbat is not mentioned here. I'm assuming he's there too. The popular item tab will now show default to showing tier 3 items. But this one also, has some implications for some builds. So keep that in mind a little bit. Then we have various remasters, adjustments for volume. Announcer D-Dot from the D-Day movie or something. F-Dot obviously. Capri, Steel Scarab, Neath Skull, Dangerfield, Odin Pandemonium, Raging Drums Out, and Ram Nature's Guardian, as well as ability volume for Secret Agent, Apollo's Ultimate, and Guan Unicorn's Basics Attack. And then we have some UI fixes, where bank time could appear in normal matches after a ranked match, and the scoreboard was missing players, spectator fixes that we'll see if they work, and the commendation system where the skip button would not work. Thank God for that, because that was annoying. And something where the commendation wasn't counted properly, which should now work too. Items. Now for the changes. This is, again, a fix. Ethereal Staff fix an issue where a guard could have more than 3 debuff stacks if multiple opponents had the item. I reported this on PTS actually, so I'm really glad that it's fixed now. So it was definitely heard. And guards are push. Empty the Crypts fix an issue where his ultimate was damaging structures. That is obviously not intended. Ardio fix an issue where spamming stance change could cause the bear to T-pose. Yeah. Bakasura fixed an issue where takedown debuff would display confusing damage calculations in the combat log. Shadowbog can no longer recall to base while inside of a wall. Funny one, actually. Freya fixed an issue where abilities were highlighting too many enemies. Hell fixed an issue where certain health skins would not play certain audio modes on certain skins. Mercury, Fastest God Alive, fixed an issue where movement speed from Bamba's Mask would not provide additional power or until something else updated movement speed. Scylla fixed an issue where the item stack pad would fully stack her passive in jungle practice. Morrigan's ultimate now copies the target guard's item stack number and evolved items. The Morrigan will now gain the correct amount of gold while in her ultimate form. Fixed issues where the Morrigan could be hit by certain effects more than once when reverting out of her ultimate. The last one is interesting because I always thought that was intended for certain abilities, but it's interesting to see that even now Morrigan is still getting a lot of fixes. They want her to be played again, we'll get to that later because she also gets buffs. And those fix an issue with ability targets were not always highlighting enemies in the area over walls. Item balance. Atalanta's bow is once again very interesting because once again no one's building it. The stats are interesting enough but not valuable enough compared to other hunter items. So now the movement speed is shifted. Previously you had 4 stacks and 7% movement speed per stack. So a total of 28%. Now you have 3 stacks instead, which each only provide you with 5% movement speed, so 15% from that, but the item itself gets 10% base movement speed, much like the katana tree has. That obviously helps in the context of being a little bit faster consistently, moving around the map better and everything else, and definitely gives Atalanters some more value than before. I think it might still not be interesting for hunters, ironically, because they don't really have room for that in most builds, or they have better options in most builds. Maybe Medusa, but yeah. On the other hand, for some other gods, like for example Erlang Shen, who's got his own haste build in anyways, this might be more interesting. This might be something to look at. Gladiator's Shield. Added component to this item where basic attacks heal 1% of your maximum health and mana on successfully hitting an enemy. So what's interesting here is it says enemy, not enemy god. I've actually already contacted Ajax to verify if this is enemy or enemy god. I'm expecting it's enemy god because the ability or the item itself revolves around enemy gods. If it's minions too, this is gonna be super strong. But even just affecting gods, this is still pretty good. So you can now use this on Bellona, on Osiris, on your AA gods. And you can use this in conjunction with the abilities and get a lot of healing, like Shen too. And I think this will be quite scary actually. 1% is not to be underestimated. Say like late game, a basic attack when you have like 2,500 health would heal for 25 health. That should end up, after 3 hits, should end up being more than Bellona's 3 heals at max rank. And that only heals every 3 hits, not consistently with every basic attack. So this could be scary. And it could lead to some stupid builds, including Soul Eater as well for maximum sustain, and then just heal with every ability and every basic attack for high amounts. This will most certainly push basic attack based gods a fair bit in solo, warriors specifically, maybe even other gods. And I'm really curious who will make most use of this, and I'm really curious also if this is actually working on minions, which I hope it's not, because it would be like actually better than Death Toll. It would just be a Death Toll that scales into late game then. Just saying. Fighter's Mask gets an update, and Rangda's Mask and Protector's Mask, and they all get the same update. Now it just has a description who can buy it. Lono's Mask has a little bit of a nerf. A new sacrifice stat to the passive, minus 20% healing done. This is just because the healing wasn't really affected the same way, so it was very beneficial to build Lono's Mask on healers and just be very tanky and heal a lot, and due to the mitigation, the heal would actually be more valuable as well. Also relevant for some other guys with some amount of sustain that, you know, would build this item, like Arachne, for example. And that brings us to God Balance. Achilles gets a major shift. Achilles is at the moment a very strong, dominant early game character, and he's still very good. So these changes are interesting because I wouldn't necessarily say they're nerfs. So it gives it the gods health bonus increased from 35 plus 10 per level to 25 plus 15 per level. So less at the start, more at the end. So, but overall, this is from 235 to 325. So in late game, this is a fair bit more. Protections bonus increased from 5 plus 1 per level to 5 plus 1.5 per level. So 25 to 35. Just overall, making the defensive stance more valuable in late game. Radiant Glory increased physical power and no increase. Physical power and protections now scale from 15% to 10% to 20%. So in early ranks this is weaker, and higher ranks this is stronger. I don't know. You might want to level it now, that's the point, but yeah, in late game it would be better. In late game it would be better in either direction as well, so oof. But again, a little less in the early game. And combat dodge cooldown changed from 12 seconds in all ranks to 14 to 10 seconds. So again, you have to make the decision to level here, because combat dodge will now get less cooldown from leveling it early. Damage reduced from 55 to 215 to 50 to 210. Just 5 damage down. So the interesting thing really is that you mostly want to level this one first because of the clear and because of the damage. And afterwards you now have a lot more of a choice to make here. And I'm not entirely sure how this will turn out for him. Because once again, I think he's still a strong guard. He's still picked on higher levels, even though Hyra said he's not that valuable anymore. We will see what happens to him. I'm curious. Very, very curious. Bakasura increased camera height from 42 to 64. Scylla increased camera height from 36 to 64. And Vamana increased camera height from 36 to 64. So they all get a higher camera, gives them a bit more vision of the map, a bit of a better, more consistent feel, and that's very nice. No complaints about that one. Freya is getting nerfs, no surprise here, but the nerfs are not as much as you might think. Northern Lights decreased magical power scaling from 60% to 50%. Whoa, okay. Aurora Blade decreased mana cost per shot from 25 to 57 to 20 to 40. So it's actually easier for her to clear because Aurora Blade is cheaper. And she still has that built-in high mana sustain through, close range anyway, so that's not an issue either. On the other hand, Northern Lights takes a bit of a hit, but 10%, it takes away the burst potential a little bit. But I'd like to put this in perspective by saying that Artemis, on her 3, who is also a very late-game basic attack-focused god, and, the abilities are a secondary damage source, has 40% scaling on that, but it's a physical ability, and magical, as we know, in late game will have more damage or put more power than physical. I obviously, you can't compare the kits 1-to-1 because Freya doesn't have damage on her CC, and she has to. Well, she gets extra damage on her ranged attacks as well, actually, so it's not quite wrong. But then Artemis has a steroid instead, an attack speed steroid, so it's a different story, obviously. But I just find it odd that this ability still has that much scaling for a very basic attack-focused god. I think it should even be less than this. But we'll see how she does after this. I think the nerfs were not enough yet. Scotty. Calder, the Winter Wolf, decreased the time taken to regenerate 1 hit point from 10 seconds to 7 seconds. So he's up a bit more. Piercing Cold, decreased cooldown from 15 seconds to 14 seconds. Yeah, she can clear a little bit better, deal a little bit better with pressure. That's it. The Morrigan. Smite's most difficult goddess has dropped lower than you anticipated. One factor that is limiting her is her ability to more directly compete as a mage during the laning phase. Her early clear being weak was not a specific design choice, but a result of balancing the flexibility she brings to a team. It can be seen now that it was too low and hurt her too much. We are increasing the amount of damage Dark Omen deals to minions by a significant amount to help the Morrigan more closely match the pace of other mid laners. Dark Omen increased minion bonus damage from 20 to 80 to 40 to 160. So just double that. That is interesting. I think Morrigan is in a really rough spot at the moment, and as much as I like playing Morrigan, I don't like playing her in the current meta because it just doesn't feel nice. She gets getting some fixes along with this, which also should help her, but then she also gets this buff to her clear, which is quite significant, and I like it. And I want to see what this does for Morrigan, if this brings her back, if it suddenly pushes her all the way to the top. Because I could imagine that, as long as she works properly, this makes a very huge difference for her clear, which is also not the worst with the explosion from her basic attacks. So let's find out. Vulcan, last one on the list. Backfire now goes through walls. It's a short range ability by comparison anyway, so it won't be mattering. It won't matter much. Inferno Cannon. Now, cannon deals damage as if the target had 25% less magical protections. This is actually explained. This is not like a straight up buff, but more that protection shred was taken away from minions for a while, and the turret counts as a minion. And now instead it gets some protection shred this way, which should help it a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's okay in Vulcan. Really isn't that popular at the moment. And that's it for these patch notes. There was a video teaser of the Bellona skin as well, which looks really nice. And there were teasers of the tier 5 skins, both of them. If you want to check those out, they're also in the patch notes video that I made, the live viewing, should be towards the end. Those are very cool as well. I can tell you that much. I'm actually very happy with how those turned out so far. And that's it for the patch notes review as well. If you're new to the channel, feel free to stop by the bell. It really helps me out. Other than that, I'm gonna try and survive this heat now. I can hardly talk anymore because it's so hot in here. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out.